This
is TLV1.
TLV1 radio.
Great mixture.
I like television.
This is still V1.
This is
Tel Aviv is a beautiful city.
Great city, great radio.
TLV1.
This is TLV1.
The Tel Aviv Review with Gilad Halpern.
Hello and welcome to the Tel Aviv Review, a program dedicated to the word, to the thought and to debate. I am your host Gilad Halpern, and every week I'll be engaging in close encounters of the intellectual kind with writers, scholars, documentary filmmakers and other people who have done something to enrich us, people who have done something to make our lives a tad more interesting. And on our show today, our first guest will be Professor Ute Deichmann. She's a historian of science at Ben Gurion University of the Negev. She will tell us about the exchanges between Israeli and German scientists in the early years. Next year, the two countries will mark 50 years since the full normalization of diplomatic relations between them, and will inquire to what extent scientists paved the way. Our second guest will be Professor Benjamin Beit Hallahmi of the Department of Psychology at the University of Haifa. He is the author of a new book entitled Psychological Perspectives on Religion and Religiosity. It was recently published in English by Routledge. We will try to establish why 250 years into the age of secularism, religion still plays a crucial role in the lives of people pretty much everywhere. That's on our show today. Do stay with us. We'll be back after this musical break.
Black and blue, you're gonna kill this mockingbird. Tells me stars are true. I don't know how to stay afloat. Now you want to power. Why I never heard the word. I can be your moonlight, but not in that dress. She does nothing all day but sit down and cry. She touches the sky and wishes to die. She does nothing all day but sit down and cry. Touches the sky and wishes to die. She does nothing all day but sit down and cry. Sit down and cry. You love me black and blue. You're gonna kill this mockingbird. I can be your moonlight, but not in that dress. She does nothing all day but sit down and cry. She touches the sky and wishes to die. She does nothing all day but sit down and cry. Touches the sky and wishes to die. She does nothing all day but sit down and cry. Sit down and cry.
You're listening to the Tel Aviv Review here on TLV1. Welcome back. I am now joined here in the studio by Professor Ute Deichmann. She's the director of the Jacques Loeb Center for the History and Philosophy of the Life Sciences at Ben Gurion University of the Negev. We're here because next year will mark 50 years since relations between Israel and Germany were fully normalized. And we're here to talk about how it affected the sciences. Hello, Ute, and welcome to the Tel Aviv Review.
Hello.
One of the only things I can say in German is the famous saying that's attributed to Bismarck. Die Politik ist keine exakte Wissenschaft. Means that politics is not an exact science, but it seems that it's, as far as the early exchanges between Israeli and German scientists go, the exact sciences had a lot to do with politics. Exakte Wissenschaft ist die Politik. So between the end of the war in 1945 and 20 years later, 1965, that is the year that relations were fully restored, what was the general attitude of Israeli scientists towards their colleagues in Germany? After all, Germany at the time was one of the powerhouses of scientific research. And also, of course, we shouldn't forget that many of the early Israeli scientists were of German origin.
Okay. Generally, it has to be said that Israel had already or established quite soon relationships, scientific relationships to other countries, to France and to the United States in particular. But there was no any relationship to Germany. And this was also politically not allowed. Mm-hmm. I mean, there was a Shilomim agreement, the reparations agreement, and it explicitly excluded cultural relations with Germany. And the Israeli...
Let's put it a bit in order, because the reparations agreement was signed in the early 50s, in 1953.
52.
Yeah,
yes.
And we're talking the relations between Israel and West Germany were fully normalized 13 years later in 1965. Right. So between that period, Israel could take West German money, but do very little else.
Yes, they took that money, and that's not, I mean, I'm not going to talk about that. Mm-hmm. Just to say that it did not restore any kind of cultural agreements, and the Israeli passports had a stamp saying for all countries except for Germany, and it was really something impossible to create relationships with Germany. I mean, there was military agreements between Defense Minister Peres and in Germany Defense Minister Strauss, but they were kept secret for a lot of time. Mm-hmm. And there were also exchanges between the BND and the Mossad, but also they remained secret. That was all in the 1950s.
Yeah.
No, but I think the scientific relations were the first really officially established relations between the two countries. And this was initiated by an Israeli scientist in 1956 already. Uh-huh. And that was a quite remarkable story. And this story is not related to any politics, but just to a personal biography of this particular scientist.
Mm-hmm. Who was he?
That was Gerhard Schmidt. He was a chemist at the Weizmann Institute. And in 1956, he became full professor and head of the Department of Crystallography. And Gerhard Schmidt was the son of a German non-Jewish chemist at the University of Munich. And this chemist had become even a member of the Nazi Party in 1933. And Gerhard had left Germany with his mother and ended up in England, and he got an excellent education.
But if he wasn't Jew, why did he have to leave Germany?
No, his mother was Jewish.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, for the Jews, he was a Jew. For the Germans, he was a half Jew, but that was enough to clearly not allow him to proceed anymore at school. He was a high school student at the time.
Right.
And and he got an excellent high school education. His father paid for it. I mean, it's not that he was bad to his family, but anyhow. And he got a graduate education at the crystallography department at the University of Cambridge under Dorothy Hodgkin, who is a Nobel laureate in crystallography. And in 1948, he was asked to establish a crystallography department in Israel. And actually, he was not a Zionist, but his wife at the time was. And so they agreed to come. Then his wife, Anita, she left after a year. She couldn't take it. She couldn't. Whereas Gerhard liked a little bit Wild West atmosphere in Rehovot, in the desert and so on. And he stayed on and established a very, very fine department. And his father urged him to visit him.
His father was still a professor in Munich, even
Munich.
after the war.
Yes, he remained a professor over there, but Gerhard always rejected it. He was full of resentment, as one can imagine.
Yeah.
And
how come his father was allowed to keep his job if he was married to a Jew and had a Jewish son? And even how did he join the Nazi Party? Was it just to so-called cover his ass?
I cannot really tell about the motivation. There are people who say he did it in order to help his wife, which I can't believe, really.
It
because
doesn't sound very
yes,
logical.
and anyhow, they got divorced. No? And he did not get out of the party afterwards. He stayed in the party, but he never assumed any political position or something like that. He was obviously somehow non-political. And he just pursued his studies in chemistry.
Right.
And so he was not affected by the denazification law, and he remained in his position afterwards.
Okay, so going back to Gerhard Schmidt, in 1956, so what motivated him to basically break the law and seek cooperation with Germany, if he was so resentful towards his father and his native country?
It was a personal visit, and he was resentful, but the father urged him so often. And I think after he became a full professor, he somehow had the courage or whatever to go to Germany as an equal. That's what I assume, but I cannot say. It just is the same year. And he came to visit his father, and probably his father had told him that he would introduce him to other scientists in Germany. And Gerhard, as a chemist, he was certainly interested in the chemistry in Germany because chemistry in Israel was largely based on agriculture still. There was no chemical industry. And if you wanted to work with industry, you had to go elsewhere. And Germany was the country to do it. And so his father introduced him to chemists in Munich, but especially at the University of Heidelberg. And also he introduced him to a physicist, Wolfgang Gentner, who was known to be a non-Nazi, and he was internationally respected because of that. And Gentner was head of a department at CERN. And also he became director of the Max Planck Institute for Nuclear Physics in Heidelberg.
Right.
And it was with Gentner that Gerhard Schmidt decided to try to establish scientific relations between the two countries.
Well, was anybody else in the loop? Or was it just, a personal initiative of Gerhard Schmidt?
In the beginning, it was a personal initiative, which was taken up by Wolfgang Gentner. Gentner had different motives. Gentner was frustrated about the boring situation of science in Germany after the war. And also the Allied control law did not allow Germans to pursue certain research, like in atomic physics. And he thought, German young students or graduate students could go to Israel to do some research they couldn't do in Germany. He wanted to open up the situation for young German scientists or students.
But what was the reaction that Schmidt got from his immediate surrounding? From the Weizmann Institute?
From the Weizmann Institute.
Yeah.
No, the story is not yet finished.
Oh, okay.
And what happened then was that Amos de Shalit, who was a physicist, an Israeli physicist, also at the Weizmann Institute, but very internationally oriented. And he happened to be at CERN the same time that Gentner was there. And Gerhard Schmidt urged him to visit Gentner. And so these two basically established the relation because Amos de Shalit had more power, he had more influence at the Weizmann Institute than had Gerhard Schmidt. And Amos de Shalit, if you ask me for his motives, it is difficult to say. He had no German background, but he was, as I said, internationally oriented. He wanted, and he had a vision for the future, and he wanted to integrate Israel more into the European system. He considered Israel as part of Europe, and he thought Germany could be a way to do it. at the time, Germany was still quite impoverished from the war effects. But it was very clear that the science was growing again, and there was the Marshall Plan, which really supported the economy and also science very strongly in Germany. And so de Shalit wanted to have these relations for that reason, but also he was, as he expressed often, and as the young people who went there, whom I interviewed, expressed all the time, he was interested in helping the young Germans overcome their international isolation.
Mm-hmm. So, ironically, in a way, Israel was the place to do it, not other European countries or the United States or the other rising powerhouses of science, but rather like you said, the Wild West, scientific Wild West of Israel. It doesn't really make sense.
It doesn't make sense, and it does make sense. It would have been impossible for any other countries. I mean, France, England, all the countries which had suffered from the German war effort were not ready to establish these close relations at the time. And the United States, I mean, the Jewish community rather did not want to deal with Germans as a whole. They dealt with them as individuals, but not with the German community. They would not do it. And so Israel was indeed, ironically, that the country which helped the Germans come back to the international arena. And that had to do with the pragmatism in the country. And basically.
So were there any other voices at the time that lamented this disconnect between the Israeli scientific community and the German one? And I'm talking mainly about scientists with some sort of German background because we know about German Jews who were forced out of the country, which they felt a great sense of belonging to, and they admired in many ways, and they were really sorry to leave. And after the war, there were, I'm assuming that with the denazification process and the reintroduction of Germany into the community of nations, I'm guessing that there should be some, if not many, Jewish Israeli scientists of German origin who would say, yes, we want to go back to our original environment.
No, I think the opposite was the case. Very much so. I mean, Gerhard Schmidt was quite an exception. But he was also cautious, trying to see with whom he would work. And Amos de Shalit, I should just say it, he made it very clear that he only wanted to deal with the younger generation or with people who were clearly anti-Nazi, which was impossible in the end, but at least that was his intention. And concerning the German Jews in Israel, there were many who came also as students, such as Elisabeth Goldschmidt, who was a professor of genetics at the time. And she and Jacob Berman, another person who came as a pupil from Germany who was expelled then, they made a big effort to prevent the International Genetics Congress taking place in Germany in the early 1960s. And they said it's not a place where we can go already now. No? So they really were very outspokenly against a normalization at the time.
Because they felt betrayed.
I guess so, yeah, and it is quite understandable. And it would relate, it would be similar to many Jewish people who had been expelled from Germany in the United States or England, who had the same kind of feeling.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, was this a sentiment that was shared by other ex-Germans who found refuge not in Israel but in other countries in the West?
Yes, very, very much so. And what they expected, some of them, of the renowned ones, they said, at least we expect an apology. And it never was done. Right? And also they were not asked to come back to Germany. It was difficult at the time because of the situation in Germany, but formally that the expulsion would have been acknowledged as an injustice, that wasn't done.
Were there any scientists in the West, in the States or in France or the UK or other countries who blatantly boycotted cooperation or scientific exchange with Germany, because there it was allowed to an extent, wasn't it?
interestingly enough, there was a boycott against German science after the First World War. But there was no official boycott after the Second World War. And there are many reasons for that. I don't want to go into it. But despite that, there was kind of an unofficial boycott. And that means Germany was not excluded as a whole. But in conferences, Germans were invited as individuals. They were checked before concerning their behavior in the Nazi era. And also, I mean, Elisabeth Goldschmidt and Jakob Bormann, they had some personal contacts. That's not an overall kind of rejection, but they didn't want a normalization on the general
Interesting.
level.
So when were the ties between the Weizmann Institute and German universities formally realized?
Just what was in between, I should just tell you that. So when Amos de Chalit and Gerhard Schmidt tried to, they met together and it was very clear you couldn't do anything because of the political situation without involving Adenauer and Ben Gurion.
Yeah.
And they succeeded to involve both of them via, also interesting paths. And both Adenauer and Ben Gurion agreed.
When was that?
That was at the end of the 1950s.
Right.
And Ben Gurion made it on condition that it would not publicized.
So in a way, the scientific cooperation paved the way to the normalization of the full normalization of the ties between the two countries half a decade later.
Maybe, I can't really tell that. Maybe there were just negotiations in parallel. So that's it's something I simply don't know. No? But it was the first. But I should also tell you about the strong resistance that these efforts met at the Weizmann Institute and also in Germany. And so once the Ben Gurion and Adenauer agreed, Adenauer also helped the Israelis to get contact to the German power places. That means in economy and in politics and in science. And so the Max Planck Society was involved. And its president at the time was Otto Hahn, and he was invited together with a small delegation to visit Israel at the end of the 1950s. And when that became known, the people at the Weizmann Institute, the scientists and also the board, especially the board, was adamantly opposed to it. He said, so what, we will lose our standing in the international Jewish world and in the world as a whole if we collaborate with the institutions which played a part in the Holocaust, in the Shoah.
But what was their opposition in Germany?
In Germany, it took place a little late. There was an opposition in principle of some members of parliament, or some, it was quite a big fraction, who preferred ties with the Arab world. And it was economically more rewarding, and so there were reasons for that.
I see.
No? And that would be really a problem to have these connections with Israel.
Sure.
Right? And then there was the Hallstein doctrine. It's a foreign policy doctrine, which said that Germany cuts any diplomatic contact with countries which acknowledge the GDR, the East German country, East Germany. East Germany. And so they were afraid that the Arabs would acknowledge East Germany once they have ties with Israel.
Right.
That would be a very strong economic blow.
Yeah.
And so that was a reason why they were opposed.
Very interesting. Professor Ute Deichmann, I'm afraid this is all we have time for. So thank you very much for coming in and telling us about scientific cooperation between Israel and West Germany. In the early years, you are the director of the Jacques Loeb Center for the History and Philosophy of Life Sciences at Ben Gurion University here in Beersheba. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Hear the
ruthless sinners who has hurt all mankind. Just a Savior's own believe. One love. What about a one heart? What about let's get together and feel alright? As it was in the beginning. One love. So shall it be in the end. One heart. Alright. Thanks and praise to the Lord, and I will feel alright. Let's get together and feel alright. One more thing. Let's get together to fight this holy Armageddon. So when the man comes, there will be no doom. Have pity on those whose chances grow thin. There ain't no hiding place from the Father of creation. Yeah. One love. What about the one heart? What about the let's get together and feel alright? I'm pleading to mankind. One heart. Give thanks and praise to the Lord, and I will feel alright. Let's get together and feel alright.
You're listening to the Tel Aviv Review here on TLV1. Welcome back. I am now joined by Professor Benjamin Beit Hallahmi of the Department of Psychology at the University of Haifa. He's the author of a book titled Psychological Perspectives on Religion and Religiosity. It recently was published in English by Routledge. Hello, Benjamin. Thank you for joining us. So we can say more or less that we are about 250 years into the secular age, yet religion is not only not in decline, but it seems to be experiencing some sort of revival. Now, this simplistic distinction between secularism and religiosity that I'm going to put to you now is that secularism relies on reason, whereas religiosity relies on emotions. Now, I know this is simplistic, but I'm going to ask you, how simplistic is it?
I think it's quite simplistic, and I would, first of all, suggest not using terms like reason or rationality. I never use them when I discuss religion.
Mm-hmm.
And the way I approach religion and the way many psychologists approach religion is by trying to locate the source of religion in the normal functioning of the human brain or the human mind. In other words, religion is not something unusual. It's rather a very normal product of our ways of cognitive processing.
Mm-hmm. Of making sense of the world?
Making sense of the world, exactly. And what happens is that humans, when they look at the world, they generalize from their own experience. And the basic human experience is human consciousness, okay, which is filled with intentions and images. So we look at the world and we see intentions. For example, computers. Okay, nowadays everybody has at least a personal computer or something of the kind. And when our computer, our personal computer, gives us trouble or stops functioning, our reaction is to take it very personally. The computer has something against us.
Oh, I thought it was only me. Okay.
Yeah. So that's the way we regard the world. And when we go out and it's all of a sudden starts raining and we don't have an umbrella, again, we take it personally. It's a conspiracy against us. So that's how human beings think.
Well, projecting emotions on things that obviously don't have emotions?
Not just emotion, but intentions.
Intentions.
The important thing is intentions. So we see intentions, we see conspiracies, we see plans, we see purpose where there is none. And we connect all of it to ourselves because we are at the center. The human view of the world, of course, is very anthropocentric and egocentric, just like every one of us sees himself
both
or
at
herself.
the personal level and the collective level.
The personal and the collective. But we start, as psychologists, we start at the personal level.
Yeah.
The individual brain, the individual mind looks at the world and puts himself or herself at the center and thinks that intentions and events are always directed at us. And religion is a product of this view.
What do you exactly mean by religion? Is this a belief in God or in some supernatural entity, or the set of rules, the do's and don'ts that every religion has? What is exactly religion for you?
Okay, religion means in practice a kind of discourse that refers to another world. In addition to this world, in which we are born, we suffer, and then we die, the religious assumption is that there's another world, the world of the spirits. And there are greater spirits and lesser spirits. There are gods, there are angels, there are saints, and then there are the souls of human beings that died or haven't been born yet, and also are part of this spiritual world. So this is religion in theory. Religion in practice means negotiating with the world of the spirits, negotiating with spirits, sacrificing to the gods or the spirits or the ancestors in the hope that when we sacrifice something to the gods or the spirits, they will remember that and will help us live better in this world or enjoy an existence in heaven later on.
Yeah. So I'm going to move back to secularism now, because what it sought to do was do away with all that. So basically you're saying that the secular endeavor is contrary to human nature?
Yes, to some extent. We think that religion is intuitive, religion is natural, whereas physics, for example, is totally contrary to intuition and nature. For example, we see the sun setting in Tel Aviv, and we sit in an apartment in Tel Aviv, we watch the sun setting, and we can calculate that the sun is entering the Mediterranean about 30 miles west of Tel Aviv, right?
Yeah.
But here comes the physicist and tells us that, of course, the sun isn't going anywhere, and the sun isn't setting, and the sun isn't riding, and this is all an illusion. And in reality, there's the solar system, and there are the laws of physics, and various things about the universe which we would never guess. So this is all counterintuitive. But religion is intuitive because it's anthropocentric and egocentric.
So how does modern man combine the two? And how do we find the right balance, if we do at all?
Okay, so you agree I agree that theoretically, being secular is, again, something which is not natural or easy. It's easy and natural to believe in spirits. But I think what has been happening, secularization, which has been taking place for hundreds of years, is also the result of economic and political changes. In other words, religious institutions, let's say in Europe, had a lot of power. They had the power to burn you at the stake. Okay? And not too long ago.
Punitive powers as well.
Not too long ago.
Yeah.
And then religious institutions were losing their political powers in favor of other forces and other social groups and social institutions. So this is a gradual process where religion is losing its political power, and so religious ideas are taken less seriously. People are free to think about reality in other ways, and they do that to some extent. Okay, and gradually we have the development of a culture which is almost completely secular. We see that in literature, we see that in the arts, we see that in politics, where several hundred years ago there was the divine rights of kings. Nowadays, in Europe at least, you don't have any real kings with power. And we have equality, democracy, all these ideals which are also contrary to religious traditions. So this is partly a political change, an enormous historical political change which leads to secularization.
Okay.
Now, in some parts of the world, we don't see the same process. And what I have in mind, and you have in mind undoubtedly, is the Muslim world. Because what we observe today in the Islamic world is not a return to religion, because religion never went away in the world of Islam.
Right.
Okay, Islam didn't go through these stages of reformation and secularization like Europe did. And so there we're looking at a completely different historical
but for
situation.
a brief moment, the Arab world was ruled by secular people. I'm talking about Nasser and Saddam Hussein. They weren't a religious authority at all, and they had all the power in the countries.
Yes, but still, if it's true that relatively speaking, the regime was secular, but the regime still paid respect to religion. Even in Egypt under Nasser or in Iraq under Saddam, you couldn't talk about religion the way we are talking now.
Yeah.
Okay, you would get in trouble. And religion in Egypt, for example, was always part of the constitution. You see, but it's true that there were secularizing forces in the Arab world. But then, again, for political reasons, we can put it right on the table and say that the United States was very much opposed to secularizing forces in the Arab world, because we are talking about the Cold War and the struggle against the Soviet Union and communism. So in this struggle, every secularizing movement was regarded as a threat to the West and as a potential ally or real ally of the Soviet Union. And we can go back to what happened in Afghanistan,
Sure.
where the United States supported the Mujahideen, which became the Taliban. And actually, many people have pointed out that the ISIS of today and Al-Qaeda are all the descendants, or the direct descendants of the Taliban and the Mujahideen.
Yeah.
And so this is, again, politics.
Yeah, exactly.
That
So
determines...
I want to take you back to the personal level.
Yeah.
But, together with this decline of religion in public life, which is what you described happened in Europe, there was also a decline in the place that religion played, in the role that religion played in the day-to-day lives of the average people.
Yeah.
So how did this come into play?
Well, again, because of the loss of political power, religion could no longer enforce.
So it's strictly a political question.
I think that when you look at history, it's clear that politics is very, very important. And if you look at the French Revolution, for example, the French Revolution was also a revolution against religion, because religion was very much part of the monarchy. Look at the American Revolution in 1776. It created a nation with no official religion. And this was a major breakthrough. Okay, and it reflected the loss of power. Okay, the people...
maybe it was just the separation of power, wasn't it? I mean, wasn't it mainly the separation between political power and religious power, the separation between church and state?
Yes.
But after this separation, the church could have remained as powerful as it was before, only without the political power. But with the extent of the power that they yield on the individual, yet it didn't happen.
Yes, because individuals very much relish the freedom to do what they want, to think differently. And what we see, secularization for many individuals, for most individuals, means religion becoming an individual matter and religion becoming private and individual, in the sense that you can make up your own religion. You may decide that you believe in a little bit of Buddhism, a little bit of Christianity, a little bit of New Age, and you create this concoction and you can enjoy it and no one is going to touch you.
Yeah.
This is the big difference, whereas 500 years ago, or even less, it was impossible.
So what you're saying at the end of the day, that religion still, in every person, even in the most secular societies, I'm thinking about, I don't know, Scandinavia or the UK, religion to an extent, or maybe religious principles, are still very much present.
Yes, but I think that the big difference is we can say that religious ideas, given what I described earlier, the basic cognitive mechanisms that create religion, they're all in place. So religious ideas are still intuitively very attractive. But even if we entertain them, we invest a lot less in them. You see, that's the big difference.
Mm-hmm.
So privately, I may indulge a little bit in, let's say, reading books about Buddhism.
Yeah.
But I don't go to worship. I don't spend money on it. I do a lot of other things.
Yeah.
And we can look at the culture and see the big difference with individuals investing their time and money and energy in lots of other things.
Mm-hmm.
And among those many other things, they may dabble a little bit in something which has to do with the world of the spirits. But the investment is minimal.
Mm-hmm.
So that's secularization.
Okay. And what is the situation in Israel? Because on the one hand, there was no separation between church and state in Israel. Religion still plays, to an extent, a great political role. And still, the Jewish and even the non-Jewish societies here in Israel are predominantly secular, or at least define themselves as. I mean, no, you wouldn't think so?
I don't think so. I think, first of all, let me say that Israel is a special case.
Yeah,
we know Israel is
it applies to just about anything you want to discuss.
But even when it comes to religion, Israel is like Iran or Saudi Arabia or one of these places, because, like you said, officially there is no separation of church and state. Mm-hmm. There is no freedom of religion in Israel. Mm-hmm. Okay,
but still, you have to agree that Israel is a lot more progressive when it comes to that than Saudi Arabia and Iran.
Oh, well, you'll be surprised. For example, the state of Israel officially recognizes only 16 religions in addition to Judaism.
Uh-huh.
Okay, there is such a thing as gaining official recognition from the state, which is not the case in the United States, for example, or Britain. Okay, in Britain or the United States, you can start any religion you want. And you don't need permission or recognition. So it's a lot more complicated. But I agree with you that in practice, and in places like Tel Aviv, of course, you can do anything you want. Yeah. We know that. But in reality, the government invests huge amounts of money in one religion, which is Judaism. Mm-hmm. Okay, the state follows the Jewish calendar. We all live following the Jewish calendar. And most individuals who consider themselves secular, if you look closely, you'll see that they do a lot of religious things.
Mm-hmm. Like what? Like a bar mitzvah or a circumcision?
Exactly, exactly. I mean, these are significant acts. Mm-hmm. And the fact is that when it comes to the rites of passage, life cycle, ceremonies like weddings.
But aren't these secularized religious conceptions? Because if going back to your definition of religion as this belief in a supernatural world, yes. I mean, most secular Israelis don't subscribe to that.
Well, unfortunately, we all have to go to funerals sometimes.
Yeah.
Okay, and I go to funerals, and everybody supposedly is secular, and there are these religious people who are dressed in black, and they carry out the religious ceremony. Mm-hmm. So the first fact is that these people still follow.
No, because they have to.
No, they don't have to. There are other ways. If you really want to, you can do other things.
Okay.
But on top of that, so they go through the ceremonies, and the fact is that people join these individuals dressed in black in saying some prayers, okay? But also, when you listen to the way they talk, spontaneously, they may say things, and this is, again, not part of religion. They're going to say that the deceased person is now watching us from heaven, from above. Right. This is, remember that all secular Israelis talk about the people who are watching us. Grandfather is now watching us from above and is very pleased to see his grandchildren doing this or that, right?
Yeah.
Or that grandpa is now joining grandma in heaven, or vice versa, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is, of course, assuming that there is this world of the spirits where the dead move up to.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you have to watch what people are doing and what people are saying, and then you realize that there is an involvement in religious ideas still.
Yeah, well, this is really fascinating, but I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there. Professor Benjamin Beit Hallahmi, the author of the recently published Psychological Perspectives on Religion and Religiosity. Thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
That was our show for today. Thank you very much for listening. Also a big thanks to our technical producers, Leo Peleg and Adam Scher. I'm your host, Gilad Halpern. Join me again next week for another edition of the Tel Aviv Review. In the meantime, don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and do not hesitate to get in touch via Gilad, G-I-L-A-D, at tlv1.fm. See you then.
יושב בשדה לא יוצאת לי אפילו מילה, לא כל שכן דיבור של אמת, לא כל שכן תפילה, מחשבות של הבל מעל ראשי משוטטות, גלים גלים את הדעת הן תוקפות, ריבונו של עולם איך מפה מצליחים להתרומם, איך אחא נהפכתי מחי לבחינת דומם, השם הצדיק תגמור בעדי, כל מה רציתי זה להיות יהודי, איי 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 איזה עצבות, מוחין דקטנות, מוחין דקטנות, איי 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 איזה עצבות, מוחין דקטנות, מוחין דקטנות, יושב בשדה מבולבל בוהר, אף נקודה טובה באופק לא רואה, הזמן מעיק עובר בזחילה, ואני עוד לא הצלחתי לשחרר אפילו מילה, נשמה ענייה דבויה וסחופה, עלייך עיני יורדה דמעה, איך עד שנחצבת מיכל של אמת, נגזר עלייך בעולם החומר לשוטט, איי 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 איזה עצבות, מוחין דקטנות, מוחין דקטנות, איי 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 איזה עצבות, מוחין דקטנות, מוחין דקטנות, והצדיק אמר בשמחה תמיד להיות, את האור בתוך החושך די קל לגלות, ואם המצב הוא אוי ואבוי אוי 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 אוי, תגיד ברוך שלא עשני גוי, איי 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 איזה עצבות, מוחין דקטנות, מוחין דקטנות, איי 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 איזה עצבות, מוחין דקטנות, מוחין דקטנות, טה נה 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 נה, ay na 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 ta 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 ta, ay ta 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 ta, da 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 da, ay na 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 na, ay na 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 na, ay ta 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 ta. כשאני עומד ללכת עייף ומדוכדך, מהשמיים מרחמים עליי, פתאום הלב נפתח, שפתיי דובבות מילה ועוד מילה, ופתאום אני מוצא את עצמי עומד בתפילה, אבא עתיק, אבא רחמן, הלב יבש כמו דיקט כל כך הרבה זמן, רחם עליי, רחם בבקשה, קרב אותי אל אור פניך, אל הקדושה, מלך גיבור, מלך ענב, זדים אליצוני, באים לי מהגב, רחם עליי, אל תשאיר אותי בחוץ, מושכני אחריך וערוץ, איי 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 איזה עצבות, מוחין דקטנות, מוחין דקטנות, איי 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 איזה עצבות, מוחין דקטנות, מוחין דקטנות, ואני כל מה רציתי בשמחה תמיד להיות, את האור בתוך החושך לבקש ולגלות, ואם המצב הוא וואי 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 וואי, ברוך השם אני נושם וחי, ואני כל כך רציתי לא להתייאש, את האור בתוך החושך לבקש ולבקש, ואם המצב הוא גבעל לא הזמין, ברוך השם הנה יתפלק לי שיר. טה-נה-נה-נה-נה טה-נה-נה-נה-נה איי-נה-נה-נה-נה-נה איי-איי-איי-איי טה-נה-נה-נה-נה טה-נה-נה-נה-נה טה-נה-נה-טה-טה-טה-טה-טה-טה-טה